So yes, the final reviews are in for Assassin's Creed Shadows. And yeah, I've actually been playing this one early as well. But let me tell you what, there are a ton of opinions about this game, and I'm going to be answering some of your biggest questions about this one, including is it too bloated of an experience? Is it just too big? Also, how long does it take to complete the main story arc? We'll also talk about the game's core systems, the parkour, stealth, and combat, and ask the most important question, is the game even fun? Plus, we'll also talk about the graphics and the technical performance of the game between console and PC. And by the way, I'm doing a very big Assassin's Creed Shadows giveaway, so for a chance to win a copy of the game, follow that link in the description below. And a very special thank you to Intel and Zydex PC for making this possible, and also to Zydex for my brand new PC, which I played Assassin's Creed Shadows on, and it ran absolutely beautiful. And let me tell you what, Zydex PCs has been my go-to gaming experience for the past couple of years. I've been able to run Assassin's Creed Shadows with no issues, 4K experience. It has been absolutely amazing, and my PC has been quiet as a mouse throughout the entire experience. And I've been able to run this game with all the bells and whistles, no problem, ray tracing, ultra, all of it. It is just stunning what my Zydex can pull off now. It doesn't hurt that the PC itself is absolutely beautiful and fully customizable when it comes to your colors. You can go into the menu, switch out the colors, do all sorts of cool stuff. And the good news, if you're on a budget, you don't have to worry. Zydex offers a wide variety of PC options on their website, so you can really go in there and fine-tune the options to the budget for you. And one thing I've absolutely loved about my experience with Zydex PC throughout the years is their professional customer support. So they're always there for you through and through. If you make a major purchase, they will respond to you pretty much instantly and walk you through the process seamlessly. So yeah, if you're interested in Zydex PC, be sure to follow that link in the description below, and also don't forget to enter that Assassin's Creed Shadows giveaway. And once again, thank you to Zydex PC and Intel for believing in what I do and sponsoring this video and providing the giveaway keys. All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and find out what the reviews have been saying about AC Shadows, and I'm going to be sprinkling my own opinion throughout all of this, so let's do this. We're going to start out with the early game, which I was not expecting this at all. So the first 10 hours of the game, you play exclusively as one character, and yes, that is Naoe. She is our fragile but fast shinobi, ideal for stealth and precision kills, and kind of lines up with what you would expect from an assassin's gameplay experience. You know, the parkour, stealth, that sort of mechanic. And then after 10 hours, you do rotate to Yasuke, who's going to be our tanky samurai built for brute force and head-on combat. But after being forced to play about 10 hours straight of Naoe at the beginning of the game, it is a bit jarring to play as a clunkier non-parkour character. So you've been warned, you have to get used to this, and you will understand eventually how to utilize Naoe and Yasuke throughout the open world. Now, what's really cool is the switching mechanics. Once the game opens up, you could freely switch between Naoe and Yasuke. Player preference is going to be interesting because I think most players will default to Naoe unless forced to play as Yasuke for specific combat-heavy sections, just because Naoe does line up with what you would expect for Assassin's Creed. She's a lot quicker. You can get around the open world much easier. So yeah, let me know, based on the gameplay that you guys have seen so far of AC Shadows, who you might be maining, I guess you would say. But I will say this, for me personally, this is some of the best parkour in an Assassin's Creed game. I thought they did a superb job with Naoe. Combat is definitely a lot of fun, especially for both characters. Naoe's combat definitely feels more guerrilla warfare, getting out of the way, dodging, and then getting back in there, and then rinse and repeat. It also feels really good between all the weapons. And then Yasuke, he definitely does feel like a tank. He can actually take a lot of hits without even flinching, and you feel like you're more sturdy against those bigger opponents. So honestly, with my experience so far with the game, I've enjoyed the sheer variety between the two characters. Now, we got to talk about the core gameplay loop and how it basically differs from previous Assassin's Creed entries. So we got target boards that has returned, and basically they have reworked a little bit. And we do have a lot of targets on the board that we will be assassinating. You'll notice side activities, and there's going to be multiple layers of shadowy organizations this time around to dismantle, which I found really, really cool. Now, the main narrative, let's talk about that. It's going to be a revenge-driven storyline involving killing 13 key targets with plenty of side objectives to keep you busy. Now, for those side missions, they're, according to some reviews, varied and engaging with unique challenges like hunting down infamous Ronin or disavowed shinobi, far more compelling than older Tell This NPC quests. However, some reviewers did note that it got repetitive. Core gameplay revolves around traveling to locations, sneaking into bases, and completing objectives, for example, assassinating targets or retrieving items. Now, we know this formula. They didn't really take any chances with Assassin's Creed Shadows when it comes to the actual formula, but they did streamline the game compared to like AC Valhalla. So if you did not enjoy AC Valhalla, this is much more of a streamlined experience, which is great. It's still a very, very big game, but I think for that reason, you guys will like it. Now, some reviewers did say that the formula is also predictable. Many missions feel identical with players often jumping into a base, grabbing an item, and escaping without much variation. Now, what about the stealth gameplay? We have seen some actual improvements there, and this is where Naoe comes into play. So we got prone and crawl finally in an Assassin's Creed game, so both protagonists can go prone and crawl, expanding stealth options. But again, Yasuke, he's going to be limited with his stealth. Now, light and shadow actually play a major role in this game, and nighttime is especially useful, so it's wise to kind of wait for night and take advantage of that when you're playing as Naoe and you want to infiltrate a larger fortress or something like that. You do get a lot of tools as well: smoke bombs, bamboo reeds for underwater breathing, and eagle vision for marking enemies. But you can't actually utilize an eagle that floats over. Thank God. I personally didn't care for that at all in previous Assassin's Creed games, and I'm so glad that they kind of kept the characters grounded in reality in that way. Now, of course, we got to talk about more about Naoe's abilities. So she does have a ton of lethal shadow dwelling abilities, which I love. But, some people felt like her movement had some issues. Like, for example, had a weighty feel to it. Her movement and momentum felt sluggish for a ninja. Pivoting and directional changes, switching direction or pivoting felt unresponsive. And for grappling hooks, apparently zipping up walls and leaping between rooftops can feel inconsistent and clunky. And, I have played this game for probably, I think, about 20 hours now. And I gotta say, I disagree with a lot of these complaints. I feel like by far, Naoe is one of the most capable assassins we have ever seen in an Assassin's Creed entry, and she feels so great. Now, when it comes to Yasuke, that's a different story. I suppose he's meant to be clunky, and there are major climbing limitations with him, but he is a different gameplay style and different gameplay loop. But a lot of people would say his character feels kind of like anti-Assassin's Creed, I guess you would say. But he's there for certain objectives and different side activities, and you can brute force your way through those for sure. And that's where we got to talk about combat. So a lot of reviewers said that the combat does feel familiar, and some even said serviceable. So combat feels similar to Origins and later entries, functional but not groundbreaking. Now, there are some very satisfying moments: executing precise kills, sweeping a Ronin's legs, and finishing with a Tanto, or landing a perfect Nagata strike feels absolutely rewarding. And those finishers that Yasuke can do are crazy good. Those are brutal, let me tell you what. Now, there's some really cool armor breaking mechanics as well. Some reviewers called this goofy charm, I suppose, and they add humor and satisfaction. But when you see like armor flying off an opponent, I think it's very satisfying. You're doing some damage. Now, with that comes weapon variety. We've got katanas, bows, teppo rifles, and more, each with their own unique play styles. And each character, Naoe and of course Yasuke, has their own weapons that you can utilize. And we got to talk about one of the complaints that I did notice some reviewers mention, and that is spongy enemies. So armor mechanics make enemies more durable, of course, requiring players to destroy armor before dealing significant damage. And I really think that some of these reviewers did not utilize the hideout, which we will be talking about more in just a moment, to upgrade their weapons and abilities, which is absolutely a center focus in this game. I think the hideout is more useful than a lot of these reviewers realize, and you have to equip certain weapons that can armor pierce, break armor, or you're just not playing this game right. You're not playing it as an actual RPG. You really have to utilize the upgrade path in the hideout and some of these weapons that offer some really, really cool abilities, or you will struggle. You got to pay attention to stuff. So another complaint was a lack of depth, apparently. So despite a wide variety of weapons, combat lacks innovation and feels repetitive. I felt like there was, at least earlier in the game from my experience so far, it feels pretty good with how they roll out the new weapons to you. It's always very exciting getting a new weapon. And if you do get bored, I suppose you would say, there's always the option to mix it up and switch to Yasuke and try something different and new. So that's one thing that I do really like about having two characters, is being able to switch between them. Now, we got to talk about the actual open world and exploration. So this is an absolutely massive open world, of course, with long travel times, but the variety of objectives apparently keeps it engaging. And I would have to agree with that, but there are also some repetitive things about the game. We'll talk more about that, but it doesn't hurt that this game is absolutely gorgeous and that we have 4 seasons that we can experience on this map. So even traveling back to a familiar area will feel very different according to whatever season you're in. This is a beautifully crafted, immersive world that feels very thoughtful in its design. And when it comes to actually exploring this world, there are some different new mechanics that they have introduced, and that is the scout mechanic and scout system. So you have a limited amount of scouts per season that are also tied to your hideout. You will use this to find targets and objectives because the game recommends you to use exploration mode at the beginning. You can either use that or you can use a more guided experience where the game just tells you where to go. So if you're short on time and you're working a lot of hours or what have you, you can always turn on the guided experience, thank goodness. But the way the devs intend it is to play in that more explorative mode. I tried it at first, and I got to tell you, I was somewhat disappointed in it, to be honest with you. Because yes, I do like the idea of being able to find your own path through the game, find that objective for yourself. But I felt like they needed an option to go up to NPCs and ask, hey, do you know where this is? Or do you have any idea where this character is? This is something that was in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and I felt like it was badly needed with this system to make it more realistic. With the current system, when you're in the explorative mode, you're just kind of aimlessly trying to find the objective, and you're also holding down the L trigger to zoom in and see the key points and hoping that the blue dot appears. That's basically how it went for me. But you can get lucky with the scout and find your target that you need. That's the idea. You use the scout to find what you're looking for on the map. And sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes you just cannot find your objective at all. And you're wondering, what am I doing wrong? And basically, it's kind of like a needle in the haystack at some points. At least that was my experience from that. But I do love the option of being able to go into guided mode. At the very least, they have that. Or I would probably make this even more of a complaint. But we also got to talk about seasonal changes. So yeah, I mentioned that previously, but there's more than just a visual impact here. Of course, we got winter, it brings snow, spring features blooming flowers, all that cool stuff, but it has a gameplay impact. For example, footprints in the snow alert enemies, icicles can be traps, and new hiding spots can emerge in spring. So that sort of thing adds a lot of variety and a lot of fun elements, especially to Naoe's gameplay. You'll notice that I'm specifically bringing up Naoe's kind of gameplay arc here when it comes to that sort of thing, because stealth is somewhat limited with Yasuke. And the open world is just astonishing. Again, you got villages, cities, each with unique architecture, landmarks, and atmosphere. But one thing that I really, really wish they would pull back on is the cluttered UI. That's one thing that really bothered me. I was trying to find an option, that a lot of these PlayStation exclusives, by the way, have. Ghoshima, Horizon franchise, where if you run for 3 to 5 seconds, the HUD disappears. So they need that sort of option, at least in my opinion, in this game. It would go a long way to show the beauty of feudal Japan. I really hope that Ubisoft considers adding that in there. Now, what about leveling and difficulty? There's a lot of opinions about this one. I saw some complaints as well. So let's talk about the complaints. So stingy leveling, as it's called. So the leveling system feels grindy, with high-level enemies often one-shotting players, even in quests the game deems appropriate for their level. Now, some comments about that one. I did notice I was running into higher level enemies and just dying very, very quickly. Of course, you have to be aware of that on the map. You'll notice that each region has a level recommendation. It's not a requirement, a recommendation. Like, hey, there's going to be level 28 enemies in here. You're level 11. Be careful. And you notice a skull icon that you probably shouldn't face off against that enemy at all. And even attempting a stealth kill on them probably will not work. However, I did notice that I was facing off against significantly higher level enemies successfully if I paid attention to what was going on in the hideout and utilized the blacksmith and upgraded my armor and made sure my armor was up to par. That is by far one of the most important things about this game. If you neglect that, you're going to really struggle. Now, another complaint apparently was misleading indicator. So quest levels turning from red to black, indicating readiness, can still lead to encounters with overpowered enemies. I didn't really experience that much. Now, what about the grind with this game? Is it grindy? So progression often requires completing boring side quests, according to some reviews, or resource gathering missions to level up. And there is some resource gathering that is required when it comes to advancing what you're doing with your gear, of course. That makes sense. And then expanding your hideout. But I was finding myself naturally finding those resources on side missions, even main activities. So it wasn't really that big of a deal for me. I would just grab all the resources and find out, oh, I'm good to go. I can easily build this or that. So it wasn't really a big issue for me personally. It just was naturally happening. Now, there's a lot of side activities and side things that you can do in Assassin's Creed. Of course, that's going to be in basically any Ubisoft game. We've got a lot of collectibles, base building, which you really do have to be mindful. They say it's optional, but I feel like it is somewhat required if you really, really want to survive some of these encounters. I highly recommend to not skip out on the hideout this go around. I think it's absolutely critical to dive into that. Now, we also have meditation, kata practice, and those shrine visits, which some might consider repetitive. At the same time, I really do appreciate some of the calming effect with some of these. I love that about Ghost Shima. Ghost Shima is one of my all-time favorite open world games ever. And to see that sort of thing in this game is really nice. We also have another little bit of a complaint here, excessive exposition. So there's going to be frequent auto-follow sequences with NPCs who deliver long, uninteresting dialogue, according to some reviews. I didn't find this to be the case. I felt like the dialogue was pretty necessary in taking the story where it needed to go, and you're usually walking through new scenery, some sort of beautiful temple or something like that. So if you can't appreciate the environment while you're walking and experiencing this, then you will have a tough time, of course. And the pace is basically described as player driven. So you'll be able to switch it up however you want. If you want to go full blown stealth throughout the experience with Naoe, you can absolutely do that. And then of course, if you want a more combat heavy experience, you can play as Yasuke, which is really, really cool. Now, there are some missions I did notice where it is an absolute requirement to play as either or character. So just know that. I know it was advertised where, hey, you don't have to play as Yasuke at all, or you don't have to play as Naoe at all. That's not the case whatsoever. You will have to engage some sort of gameplay with both characters. Now, every action does feel somewhat meaningful here with constant progress and rewards for exploration and completion. And a lot of reviews did really appreciate that as well. But some reviews did again note that it felt very, very grindy. Leveling up requires completing repetitive side quests or grinding resource for those base building perks. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the flaws and quirks of the game. AI and physics. So when it comes to that, you're going to occasionally have inconsistent AI behavior, of course. That's going to happen. It is recommended, by the way, if you really want to play this game at a proper difficulty, to go up to expert. That's what I'm hearing. That's the best experience with this game, for sure. So don't keep it on default. Try it on expert if you're really kind of struggling with the AI and if you feel like the game is too easy. Because I guess the AI unlocks new moves and ability on expert. And what about the story and the total play time? When it comes to main story length, it's about 50 hours to complete the main story. Now, I highly recommend canon mode because I did see complaints that the story feels incomplete or inconsistent, especially when you get to the end of the story. However, canon mode might alleviate some of these complaints because it's going to feel like, I think, a more paced out, complete story because it's written in the way the developers, the writer really wants you to experience the story. So I myself, I have canon mode on. So I highly recommend it. Of course, when you shut canon mode off, you're going to have more choices and apparently consequences, which I never really tested out. But honestly, this is an Assassin's Creed game, and I think about Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed 1, that sort of thing. And I like it to be a definitive narrative experience. Let me know if you're in the same boat as me or not. But apparently when it comes to the story and presentation, a lot of reviews actually complimented it, saying it's a decent narrative. Story takes time to build, though. You know, those first 10 to 12 hours you're playing as Naoe, and then it finally opens up. But then again, some reviewers did say the story is all over the place and confusing and splintered with how it's actually written and formatted. That might be because of, you know, not turning on canon mode, or it might be just the way how the board is presented as well, because it really starts opening up with how you can explore the different story arcs, which also, by the way, leads me into another complaint that I noticed, that some players might actually get lost to where the actual main plot line is. So it used to be, you know, a lot of these Assassin's Creed games just had a journal and you could see, you know, your main mission, side activities. And I myself, I'm just going to say I prefer that over the board. But the board is also very cool. You know, let me know your opinion on that one. I'm still very conflicted, but I like to know where the main story arc is at all time. Now, when it comes to voice acting, it's described as a mix. I saw this from the reviewers that gave the game like a 9 out of 10. So English voiceover is hit or miss. And some reviewers actually recommend to switch it over to completely Japanese voiceover. And if you watch the, Shogun, the FX TV series, you're going to be used to that anyway. And it is probably going to be a better, more genuine experience for sure. Now, cinematics are kind of all over the place as well. There's some stunning visuals here, though, and direction. At the same time, there's some moments that are absolutely jarring, in my opinion, but I really love the soundtrack on some parts. It's like kind of like, I don't know, some reviewers described it as Japanese psych rock from the band Teki Teki, and it adds this Tarantino-esque kind of flair to key scenes, and it just works. I'm like, man, this is absolutely badass. So that's one thing that I really do like about the game. What about technical performance? So I was playing on Ultra PC, and I did experience some weird oddities here and there with frame rate drops and dips. But then again, a lot of my time was spent without that day one patch, and it seemed like things did improve with the day one patch, and we will be getting future patches as well. But when it came to the PlayStation 5 and even the PlayStation 5 Pro, some reviewers did note that the hideout really did struggle with some frame rate issues. But, you know, I expect that this will improve down the road. This is only the beginning. We'll see what happens. Now, also, they did say that there are those occasional glitches, but this is one of the less glitchy Assassin's Creed games, at least in my personal experience. And I've noticed that a lot of reviewers are also saying the same things. That's not to say that the game is perfect. There are definitely going to be those hiccups and glitches for sure. But in terms of performance versus glitches, some of the issues for me personally was more on the performance side of things, some issues with the world streaming. But yeah, waiting for more future patches. So overall, let's talk about the game's strengths and follow up here with some final thoughts here. So yeah, overall, I think Assassin's Creed Shadows is an excellent entry into the Assassin's Creed franchise. And I know for a fact that hardcore Assassin's Creed fans will absolutely love this game. And then if you've been missing out on Assassin's Creed, the franchise, maybe you've taken a break off it, this would be a really good reason to jump back in and try it out. At least that's what I think. There's a lot going on here. There's 2 playable characters, and I think a lot of people might be thrown off by the fact that you are kind of like stuck playing as Naoe in those first 10 hours, and then you rotate onto Yasuke, who is a clunkier character when it comes to parkour. And I do think that that might throw some players off, but if you're patient with the game and you let Yasuke's story arcs open up and his missions open up, you'll see that there's a lot of opportunities for him as well as Naoe in the open world structure. So they kind of complement each other in that way. But yeah, just exploring this world is an absolute joy. Yes, there are some repetitive things about this game, of course, but I also really feel like Ubisoft has been really in tune to their community and has listened to feedback, especially when it comes to Valhalla, the repetitive nature of that game. There is far less of that compared to Valhalla, thank God. So it doesn't feel as over bloated. It definitely feels more focused, and that's a good thing, trust me. And remember, I'm also doing that Assassin's Creed Shadows giveaway, so follow that link in that description below or the top pinned comment. Special shout out to Zydex PC for sponsoring the giveaway, and of course, for the amazing Zydex PC. See that link in the description below to find out more about Zydex as well. But thanks guys so much for watching. Stay tuned here for more, and I will see you all next time. Take care.